One. Welcome back, everybody. My name is Fernando Martinez. No, wait. This is Season Performance Ensemble presents In Conversation with My name is Fernando Martinez. I messed that up after a year. Um,
Right. I love it. And right now, up to this point, Fernando has been in conversation with himself. But now, my name is Jefferson Denham. I'm one of the co-hosts.
And I'm Samantha Garcia. I am the other co host.
and today we
Just
have.
say, by the way, I love. Wait, Fernando. Before we get started, I gotta say, I love that it just kind of was a bit of an ad hoc start because, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to be talking about, I think, being real and how you feel about things that are not perfect. And if they're perfect, then you shouldn't be watching this episode. No, I don't think anybody raised their hand. Anyway, take it away, Fernando.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say. I was actually gonna start with that. That it's gonna be a serious episode, but serious for different reasons. A couple months ago, JD and I, like when it was both of us, we did an episode on mental health. I think it was actually the first episode or one of the first two episodes of this semester, like the spring semester, I think. Um, and a lot of that just revolved around the fact that, like, at the time I had just started therapy for the first time in my life. Um, but it's interesting because in the last, and we made reference to this in the last episode, but I feel like in the last 2 weeks, possibly even more, the three of us have been going through a lot individually, right? Like, we've been going through our own things. Um, we didn't have an episode 2 weeks ago because I just wasn't in a good place mentally. I was in a rut for a couple days. But I know that you two have been also going through things, and so I decided to not prepare anything. I think we should just have a natural conversation. I mean, they're always natural, but, like, less produced.
Structure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like less structured, and just talk about um the things that we feel, if we feel comfortable discussing those, and the way that we have coped, the way that we want to cope, the way that we sort of manage, right, and what it means to live in that state of existence, because it is not easy. um I don't know if you want to um start us off, Sam.
hmm
But what how has, like, how has mental health and generally affected the way that you've lived up until this point?
So, when it comes to mental health, I feel like it is a subject that some people feel stigmatized by. And I feel like some people they may think that they don't relate to it, or they can't understand it, or some people think that they're alone in their state of mental health. But I truly think that it's something that affects everybody, and it's something that recently I've come to realize is something very, very important that we all need to nourish and take care of. Because when you brush it off, and you think it's not of importance, or something that needs to be taken care of regularly, it it can hit you like a ton of bricks. And today it hit me like a ton of bricks, and I was just really excited to come on this episode and um, see my best friends and just do this, because I think a sense of community is something that has really helped me cope. And mental health has just been something very prevalent in my life lately, and definitely my whole life, but I'm becoming more aware of it every single day, and how things affect me, affect my mental health every single day. And just as I think with everybody during this pandemic is realizing day by day that their mental health is something that needs to be paid attention to.
Yeah, I actually wanted to sort of follow up with something that you said, because I think it's really interesting because um at least demographically speaking, right? Because a lot of the people that are watching this are either juniors or seniors at the university, right? Or if they've already graduated, so they're getting closer to their mid 20s. Sam, you and I are getting closer to our 30s, which is, it's weird to think about. But it's
Oh, please.
I was waiting for that one. I was waiting for
Yeah,
that.
JD, I swear, like I'm gonna get somewhere with this, but
It's happening.
the reason why I bring it
No,
up.
I'm talking about you're 30. Because do you know how old I am? Okay, keep going.
No, yeah, you're 25. The reason why I bring this up, though, is because I feel like a lot of people too, especially when you look back at it, you recognize that there were signs there all along, like there were patterns that you didn't know, right? Because maybe it's just when undiagnosed, or culturally speaking, it's something that you don't talk about or whatever, right?
Yeah.
But when, for example, with me, like when I experienced it as a teenager, it felt very dramatic. I just felt really over the top, and um the older I got, the more serious I became about it, and the more apparent it was, right? So like I was like, okay, well, I need to do something about this. I need to fix this. Like I need to be more proactive about how I handle my own mental health. But I think that whenever you aren't in the best place, it seems to hurt more now that you're older than when you were younger, right? Because you would think that you'd have a better grip on it. And the reason why I bring that up is because JD, I think you've always been very, very vocal about your own personal struggles, about reaching out for help. Like you bring it up when people need to hear it the most. And so I wanted to talk to you about that as well. Like how, same question as with Samra, like how has like mental health affected your life, because you've experienced more life than the both of us have, right? And I mean, it's just how have you been coping with it? Because it's something that you've been struggling with for a long time.
Yes, right. So since my early 20s. So this happens to be, I believe I'm right about this. May is Mental Health Month. And dare I say, every month is Mental Health Month for me. So, yes, I've been struggling with this since 22 or so. And for our audience too, think about this. We've already touched on it with what both Fernando and Sam alluded to, that I don't think we're very well equipped. Certainly, we're not trained or taught how to really take care of our mental health. It's invisible if you think about it. It's like when you break a leg, you see that. But if you're struggling and in pain mentally with mental anguish, you don't see that wound, but you see the manifestations of it, certainly. And so we're not, have you, dear audience, have you ever felt triggered and overreacted and you're like, why did I behave that way? Or, I mean, there's all kinds of circumstances where we are maybe feeling a little mentally out of control. And I think it's because we're not taught to be aware of ourselves and to give ourselves, I mean, I've got a lot of different strategies now that I've accumulated over the years.
Mhm.
One of the things we may have talked about previously was healthy self-talk. And actually that's based on an umbrella challenge. Just because you have a thought, now I'm a depressive, and so all my thoughts that tend to start out negative. You suck, you're a loser. And it's stuff I've just sort of like absorbed because of my upbringing. It doesn't mean you're slave to it for the rest of your life, but it's good to see where, at least where it comes from, and identifying that much. So thought challenge is a big one for me. Like if some thought comes along, I can call bullshit on that thought. I can say, I think that thought coming from a toxic person who implanted that in me, and I don't have to believe it. Now, that might sound very simplistic, but for me, when I learned it, it was profound. So anyway, and we'll touch about, I guess, some other things, but I believe, and I'm just going to speak for myself because I do not think that any two people's journey through mental illness or just mental challenges, it's not always an illness, for me it is, the same. So if I say something that resonates with you, dear audience, that's great, but I would not presume, and this goes with Sam or Fernando, I wouldn't presume to know your journey, but I'll tell you mine is honestly and authentic, and if there's elements of it that you can go, oh, I can use something like that, tidbit of that in my own journey, hooray, hurrah.
Jeff, I want to comment on that strategy that you just pointed out, because that's something I recently learned. And in a way of like about anxiety, like anxiety is just a beast, and I learned this technique to see it as something that is living rent free in your mind. And, to when those negative thoughts come up, you're like, you're living in here for free. Like, it's like to more witness it as something that is not coming from you. It's coming from just a negative source, and it's living rent free in your mind, and you have the absolute right to control it and push it away. So I just wanted to, yeah, add to that a little bit.
You're absolutely right. And it takes courage, it takes strength. Because we have, and we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, that we have, and I've learned this through years of therapy, we have accumulated defense mechanisms, things that we just had to incorporate when we were younger, sometimes when we were children, to survive. You had to do it to survive. However, sometimes those very same things that helped you survive when you were 12 are now not so helpful when you're 25, right? And so one therapist once told me that try to show up for that kid and say, look, I'm here now, and I'm here for you now. And back then you didn't have anyone. You didn't have an advocate, but not for you.
Yeah.
And when a therapist kind of maybe do a role play kind of thing for that, I like, oh my gosh. Let me just quickly just tell the story. And Fernando, I may have said it already. There was a particularly traumatic moment in my childhood where my dad was just really evil. Okay. And I absorbed all of it. I took it and I just took it in. And the therapist said, okay, thank you for telling me that story. Now I want you as the adult, as an adult, insert yourself in that story. Now you're watching this exchange happen. So I start to describe it, and I turn to the therapist and I say, oh my God, that guy's a fucking asshole. So anyway, there's some perspective that, and goodness knows, I shared with you guys that I started with another therapist today. It'd be my life. This is the way it goes. But I probably have said this in our talks before that, my brother-in-law is a diabetic. He's got to take a shot for insulin every day. This is my thing. I have to do, with mental health. And I've made peace with it. It doesn't make it easy when you're falling into the abyss, but you do realize that, I've been here before, and I'm going to try to kind of negotiate with my thoughts, but it's always going to be a lot of work.
Yeah, and yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, it's an ever-changing thing, right? Which is why it requires you to continuously just to be proactive and try to find ways to help. And I think it's also something that you brought up, saying that like we have developed, and obviously it's something that we develop every single day, right? We develop a new way to cope with something. For a lot of us, it's things that we've developed when we were kids that become detrimental when we're adults because it just doesn't work that way. Um, and I sort of want to go back to that because it sort of seems like a lot of us come from either cultures or a time where, I mean, like we obviously know that it wasn't okay to talk about it. Like it was shameful, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, um, and it's so weird because like because it's also genetic, right? Like it runs in my family. Um,
Mm-hmm.
my mother suffers from depression, and a lot of it is seasonal, but it's also because she lost a lot of people during Christmas, which is just and so it affects her in that way. I
Mm-hmm.
have it because of my mom. My grandfather also had it, and unfortunately, it was something he couldn't beat, right? And so I think about that a lot too. It's like he couldn't beat it, like it got to him. Um, but I just like came from a culture and specifically a family where it wasn't okay to talk about your feelings. Like I never learned to talk about my feelings. Um, I remember one day I sort of had this like just full on breakdown because like I just couldn't keep quiet, and I told my mom and I told my dad, and my mom obviously understood. She just didn't want to talk about it and it's something that she experienced. My dad just had no idea, and obviously they didn't mean to not mean well, but they just didn't know, and they just don't operate that way in it. Um, and it's been sort of ingrained in their minds that that's how you're supposed to treat it. Like all I got after I told them how I was feeling, and it was just I got a glass of water and was told to just go rest, and I'm like that's it upset me. um
Mm-hmm.
and so I want to talk to you guys about that. It's like, do you feel, and Sam, if you want to start you can, do you feel like you came from a place, from a family, from a culture where it was taboo, or is it just something that you don't, necessarily, like, you're not necessarily proactive about?
That's a really awesome question. And I think that's super important for this conversation in general, because you're really pinpointing where a lot of the anxieties and depression and all of that comes from. And growing up for me, honestly, my mom and my grandma used to live with me, and I live with my dad. And my mom always told me that I could tell her anything. But when I was younger, like, I didn't want to tell her anything because, that's my mom. I can't tell her anything. And my dad is really like not an emotional person at all. He's very stoic and very based in reason, and kind of pushes away emotional a little bit. Not that it's a bad thing. I know that there's people like that, but I I did grow up kind of being told that I was too emotional at times, and being told that kind of like over and over led to my adult life being keeping everything in because it's embarrassing, and it's too much, it's traumatic to express your emotions. So when I actually did face some things and did go through traumatic experiences and hardship and all of that, I don't want to blame it like on my parents. They've always been so there for me, and like it's a two-sided thing. But I I kind of created this my own story in my head that I cannot, talk about my feelings. I can't authentically, talk about my feelings because nobody's going to understand, or is nobody can really, help me or comfort me. And that led to a lot of, I think, what I'm kind of purging right now. And I'm kind of learning to let it out and reach out for support because, I'm being, forced to, because, I can't be happy unless I do reach out, or I just, keep it all in like when I was younger, and it will just manifest in horrible, horrible anxiety or panic attacks, just like, heartbeat just racing, and it becomes really toxic. But definitely the roots from the childhood and growing up, that has so much to do with what's ingrained about what I feel about mental health. And also, mental health was not a topic that was brought up. We didn't talk about anxiety. I didn't know that I could ever have anxiety. Like, I didn't know that could ever be a thing. And once trauma hit, and it did, I thought I was insane. So
Yeah,
yeah.
no, because I also
Can
want
I
to.
just say, we respond to Fernando? Can I respond to that
Yeah,
quickly and just say that if you're watching this, I think so many people might feel like accessing your emotions and trying to make sense of your emotions. We've been told that's self-indulgent. That's
Mhm.
not. That's not in polite society. Oh, you're just being self-indulgent. Or Sam, as you were told, you're too emotional, right? And so to fit in, to not be looked down upon, you say, oh, I'm too emotional, and you start to chastise yourself. Sometimes we begin to shame ourselves. I think shame is probably one of the biggest culprits in depression. And so understanding how that it's okay to take care of yourself is not self-indulgent. There's a line. Sam, do you feel like you felt at the time like if I access these emotions, if I give voice to these emotions, am I being too self-centered? Am I being too selfish?
Yeah.
Did you feel that way?
I always say I'm sorry after every time, no matter who I'm talking to, if it's my own boyfriend, or even my mom, who's completely there for me 100%, or even Fernando, who's always, who lived with me and was there throughout everything for me. And I always feel the need to apologize. I feel like I'm being overbearing, even if I'm just sharing what really needs to be let out, even with the people that care about me most. So definitely, it's shame is a huge plays a huge part in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing too, real quick. And it sort of ties into that too, but going back to what you were saying, Sam, about, how like you don't place all the blame on your parents. And I think it's also important for people to know that I think you can still love your parents, but also acknowledge and recognize and accept that, a part of what they did too is what created some of this, right? If it's something that they never really talked about, and granted, maybe they just didn't know either, right? Maybe because of how
Yeah.
we grew up,
How
they.
they were raised, right? And how they were raised. And
Yeah, and then we also think of like our parents who raised us in the 90s. Maybe culturally speaking, it's just, I don't know. Like, obviously, we were babies. Like, we wouldn't know, right? But like, maybe culturally speaking, it just wasn't a thing. There's just so many variables, but I think it's okay to always, I think, critique, right? And then maybe just be a little bit upset. I think that's okay.
Mhm,
But know that though it is partially their fault, it's not all of their fault. And I know that for some people it is, for others it isn't.
mhm.
Um, and I think it's really important
And
for.
can I just, I would just want to add to that, Fernando. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think a lot of people feel if they've never been in therapy before, there's a stereotype about therapy. Oh, you're just going to blame your parents. It's all your parents' fault. So, to Fernando's point, talking to the audience, that it's not wrong to say, oh, this is where it came from. You don't leave it there. You don't absolve yourself from responsibility of taking care of your own life from this moment forward. But you have to be able to see where did this come from? And only then can you at least address and face down the monster. You see, oh, this is where this particular situation, for example, my mom, bless her heart, when they got married at 8, when I was 8, divorced when I was 8, I was a young mom and she was dating. So I'm 8 and I see these strange men show up. It was very disorienting and very odd, but no one said boo to an 8-year-old explaining anything. So you're scrambling to just try to, as an 8-year-old, trying to make sense of the world. And so there's definitely things that came of that situation and others that you go, okay, I see that that was the source of some insecurity or whatever. It doesn't mean I blame my mom. I mean, I hate my mom. To Fernando's point, you still love your parents, but they're human beings. That's another realization I think we've all kind of recognized is our parents are human beings, that they're not infallible. And so when you recognize their fallibility, that's also because then you just realize they weren't perfect and I wasn't the messed up one. We're all trying to figure it out.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah, and I was bringing that up because like I mean, it's just because you know how, like, I'm moving for school and all that, and so I've been thinking about all the people I'm leaving behind. It. So I've been really sad thinking about my parents, and um, especially because of COVID, I haven't really been able to see them all that much. Um, but yeah, no, like I like would die for my parents. Like I love them so much, and
Mhm,
I think that the relationship that we have now is at its best than it's ever been in my entire life.
mhm.
Um, but it's still good to recognize that there were still things that they did. For example, like if I think back to when I first started feeling this way, it's like I was in elementary school. I wasn't even 10 years old yet, and I was feeling depressed. And I always think back to for example, like during school lunch, I would because I grew up so poor. I was like on a food assistance program in my elementary, right? So they gave us these little tickets that's I told you guys, it's like it's supposed to be in exchange for money so that I don't have to pay for anything. I would just like sell my tickets to anybody who wanted a second lunch, because the kids wanted to buy a second lunch or whatever. But I remember that after the first 15 minutes, you're allowed to go play because they like forced you to eat first. Um, and so when I would go in the yard, I would avoid talking to anybody. Like I just didn't feel like talking to anybody. I didn't feel good. I always like my stomach would always hurt, and I thought that I just had an issue with my stomach. And I grew up realizing, I was like, oh no, that's not. I don't have a stomach ache. I'm just feeling depressed, and it hits you in the stomach sometimes. It hits you in your
Mhm.
chest sometimes.
It's
It's like the.
physical.
Yeah, like you get these like weird, and that's the thing that people also don't know, and it's crazy because though depression is something that is mental, it affects you physically, right? Like it hurts sometimes physically.
Yeah.
And I recognized that I
Mm,
had that as a kid, and I would get in trouble for it. Like they would write me up for just being by myself all the time. They would tell my parents like, "Hey, like your kid's like displaying this behavior," and my parents didn't do anything about it. So though I do not, though I am not angry at them, it's like obviously they also have a responsibility because they were told, "Hey, your kid's being weird. You know, maybe you should take a look at it,
Mhm.
respond to it, talk to him," and they never did, right? It wasn't until I was like 18 or 19 is when that other story happened.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, like I think it's good to recognize that sometimes the people you love also played a role in it. You know, it may not be the
and I also like, and I'm sorry to interrupt you again. It looks like I'm Mr. Interrupter today, but I also love how you had said earlier that we're always, it's an evolving process. You never got it licked. You never say, okay, now I got to figure it out. I don't have to ever pay any attention to any of this again. And the fact that these aha moments are happening for you now, Fernando, means that you can make sense of things. It's just like when I first started going to therapy, by the way, sorry, I'm an advocate. So if you haven't tried it, even for a short period of time, I think you might get something out of it, especially if you're a student. It is at knowledge. I know you can access it. I think it's um, like 6 months or something you can get. Try it out. I think you'd be,
Use it.
please take advantage of that. But anyway, so it's a process of constantly recognizing that I'm not the was 5 minutes ago, let alone 5 years ago or 10 years ago. And so, what worked, and we talked about this already, what worked then is not going to work now. And being aware of who you are now and how do I best take care of who I am now. I said this in, I think, of one of our last episodes that there's nobody that's going to talk to you. The voice that you hear the most in your life is your own. So, you might as well be speaking nicely to you
yeah.
because no one's you.
Yep.
That's the voice you're going to hear the most in your entire life in your head. So, in processing things like Fernando, like you just did, be kind to yourself and listen to yourself. And I believe, and tell me what you guys think of this. I believe that spare, good self talk is not selfish for this reason. The kinder you are to you, the more access you have to things that you can give to others. So if you want to be a good person, be kind to you first.
Yeah.
100%. Go ahead, Fernando.
Yeah, absolutely. And I sort of want to use this to transition into talking about coping because that's something. And I mean, before we talk about it, obviously anybody that's listening, we're not professionals, right? Though we have experienced therapy. We're not professionals. It's just stuff that like we've done and may or may not have worked for us, right?
Because
Um,
every person's different.
yeah, absolutely. So it's just, disclaimer, like obviously everybody has their own thing, like you said, Sam.
Yeah.
But I sort of want to talk about the ways that, and again, if anybody's comfortable to talk about it, but like the ways that we have coped versus the ways that we want to cope, right? And I feel like it's something that we can all sort of go around and discuss a little bit. Sam, I don't know if you want to go first. Um,
Sure. I have, just like Jeff said earlier, I've collected an archive of ways to cope with anxiety and depression. And I would say it always starts with, because there's things I will admit in the past, maybe even in the past year, I tried things that were actually a little bit detrimental because they lean towards something called toxic positivity. I didn't hear that term like before, but when I learned about it and I kind of felt the repercussions of what that is,
what is
then
it?
I toxic positivity. I heard that it's like I've really just seen it on social media, people talking about it, but when when like when you're talking to somebody and like there's issues, and or if you have issues and all you do is like just look at the bright side, and just you can change your thoughts, like you can control your mind and reprogram it into like I would say a lot of affirmations, which is really good though. I'm not saying affirmations are are a bad thing, but I'm saying I tried to program my mind to such a positive state to where I was so fragile when I was hit with traumatic experiences that I was like, dang, I was so good. I'm so good. But oh my God, now I feel like a train wreck. Like what happened? And then you feel like so bad that, that your coping mechanisms didn't work. But what I learned from that is kind of when the feeling comes, let's say for me, I suffer with like panic attacks and anxiety, and when that comes in and I start to feel like chills and lightheaded and my stomach hurts and whatever happens, I've learned that trying to more accept that it is pain and it is, it is something that is happening. Cause I literally used to be like, this doesn't even exist. Like, this doesn't exist, push it away. But actually accepting that something like a bad feeling is happening to you and more like letting it pass and letting yourself feel it fully. Like I used to hold back crying. Like I used to be like, I can't cry. Like I like literally can't. But crying is some of the best therapy, even though like I used to feel like I did it too much. And now I just embrace it as a release of like toxins in my body and my brain. Because if tears are coming out, that means that there is something that needs to be released. And that's what I learned there. And I also do, honestly, like I do a lot of meditation and yoga, and that really really does keep me at bay, and it really helps me um like face what I have to face and keep myself balanced um while, when I'm going through a tough time. And I try to do it regularly. I like to do these coping methods regularly, not just when I'm feeling my anxiety or feeling bad, so that, it's kind of almost like training and conditioning so that when it does come, I can handle it better and not feel like, like I'm dying, or like like it'll hit me like a freight train and I can't handle it, because it is a process. There's no overnight solution to any mental health issue. There's absolutely no overnight medicine that can help you. Like it's really a process. And I guess what I do is kind of just learn new ways and learn what makes me happy. And also another like number one thing that I do to cope when I'm really feeling down is to really try to find a creative outlet. Like if I feel like we're all creative beings, like even if some people think they're not creative or they're not a creative person, if you channel that feeling, that bad feeling, into maybe something creative, it helps me a lot. It puts me kind of in a meditative state. And breathing, just breathing, there's so many ways, and it's different for every single person, but those are just like some of the ways that kind of keep my anxiety at bay and, help me face it when it's really really challenging to get through.
Oh, that was, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot.
Can I just, well, no, can I just respond to some of that? So toxic positivity, I've never heard that before. And I really resonate with that. And maybe our audience does too, because you see people trying to cheer themselves up through, I believe there's a narrative we've been told, which is you have to be happy. Everyone has to be happy all the time. And that means to the detriment of processing deep emotion.
Yes.
And one therapist that I was going through said, you know what? The only way we're going to get through this particular trauma is for you to go through it, not run away from it. And it's so frightening because you think, well, wait a minute, I don't want to face this monster. But when you do, a couple of things happen. You realize that you are stronger than you realize. And secondly, the monster isn't as the bully is big and bad as you thought. As far as, and Sam, you said so many great things in there, but for our audience, I think really the answer here is whatever works.
Mm.
So we're going to tell you some things that work for us. You can try them. And if they work, that doesn't mean there isn't something else out there for you. So I know for me, again, with my therapy session today, she was suggesting some things. I've been in therapy for years, and she said some things to me I never thought of, like try some vitamin supplements. Vitamin D, vitamin B, and iron deficiency can contribute to depression. I guess the overarching point here is do healthy things for you. I know one of my coping mechanisms is to force myself to exercise. I don't always feel like it, but if I
Mhm.
don't run 3 times a week, oh, I know it. Because, and I think science has borne this out that uh, when you exercise, endorphins are released, and it's nature's way of combating a lot of this crap in your head and so forth. So, and then just recognizing and being in tune with who you are, not beating yourself up when, but acknowledging it and being there, being compassionate. And I had another therapist who always used to say to me, the only thing I have to say to you is compassion, 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 compassion for yourself,
Mhm.
because I was so myself. I had internalized so many harsh, come on, God damn it, buck up. What's wrong with you, you fucking loser, whatever. And compassion, self compassion breeds compassion for others. So
Absolutely.
anyway, these are kind of things that you just have to. It's funny in a way that you have to be cognizant of, intentionally incorporating these things, because you just feel like, why should I have to try so hard? Well, that's because a lot of life, a lot of what we internalized is not ours. It
Yeah.
wasn't ours to begin with. It was
Yep.
given to us or imposed on us, and now it's up to us to exercise them out of us, right? So anyway, that's being aware of what works. I love, Sam, what you said too. It's funny in a way to say it, but what makes you happy? I used to just dismiss that, thinking, "Oh, that's
Surely.
self-indulgent." I'm revealing a lot of my own inner self-talk because
Mhm.
it was very critical. And what makes you happy? Oh, that's just indulgent. But it's true. If you can decide, oh, this actually fuels. Here's maybe a different way to look at it. Not better, but a different way. What makes you feel life affirmed? Rather than, if happy is a trigger word for you, there's another thing. Can I just suggest? Figure out what are trigger phrases, concepts for you, where it just makes you go into impulse mode and you don't even second guess it. You don't even examine it. Recognize those things in yourself, because those are things that were imposed on you and they're worth a second look. Because if that trigger thing is happening, I don't think it's coming from you. And I think the goal till the day we die is to be as authentic ourselves. We need you, dear audience, whoever you are. The world needs you, not a version of someone else. And everyone is always imposing their, you know, version of you on you. But what the world needs is the authentic you. And by the way, don't you maybe hear me say this like I got to figure it out? I don't. I'm working on it, but that's something that I've been trying to aspire to.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, I mean, just speaking, if you're thinking about it and then speaking about it as a process, I think it's also really important, right? Like we were saying that it's an ever-changing thing, and I think that's one of the scariest parts. But it's also one of those things that, um, can also help guide you. Because like if we're talking about like coping mechanisms, something that I recognize now that I used to do is like whenever I was feeling that way, I was just like, because I don't drive, so I was just like get an Uber and like just put a random location and I would just go there and spend like 30, 40 minutes. I'd spend an hour, 2 hours just
Mhm.
like in a random spot, chilling on the floor, staring at the sky, you know? And I'm alone with my thoughts and I would tell myself like, yeah, this is helping me, but like it wasn't helping me. Like I would come home 1 in the morning, 2 in the morning, really sad. And I was like, why did I just spend all that time there? Like I used to go to Echo Park all the time by myself and do that. Like I would sit on the bench and look at the downtown skyline. Like and while it was beautiful, like it wasn't helping, you know. It just sort of felt like I was escaping and telling myself like, yeah, it's helping, but it wasn't. Like I would come home feeling the same. And um, I think it becomes one of those like trial and error things, and that's scary to think about because it's you're talking about your own well-being and thinking of trial
Mhm.
and error seems really scary, but that's what it is, right? So you have to check and see if
Wow.
something works or it doesn't, and that didn't work for me eventually. um and it's something that I'm struggling with now. Like, I don't know what works for me. And so I sort of want to talk about coping mechanisms, at least for me, when you have other people that are really close to you. For example, I'm in Ventura, so I'm like with Lindsay, like I'm with my partner all the time, right? And I feel like I still haven't learned, and it's something that we've discussed, where I'm just not very good at having a conversation about it. Like,
Mhm.
a couple months ago when it would happen, I was just like, I would shut down. Like, I would just get quiet. I would be in a bad mood and not say anything and tell her it's fine, like things, it's fine, the whole day. And it just
Mhm.
obviously wasn't. She didn't know how to approach it because I made it hard for her, and I didn't know how to approach it, right?
Mhm.
um 2 weeks ago when I like was telling you guys that I just wasn't feeling it anymore, um I think for the first time, um since we've been together, I was like, hey, like, I don't feel good. Like, I know it's gonna happen. I don't feel good. And it helped. I think, you know,
Yeah.
being able to say that you're not feeling good, for the first time, I think just laying down in bed and not doing anything helped. That's all I did. I was just laying down, and that helped me so much. It's not going to be the answer forever. Maybe in 5, 10 years, that's going to be detrimental, and it sucks, but you just have to keep trying. Um, and I think that part also, and I think it's also good to acknowledge that it does suck. I think it makes it harder for people like us who are already struggling to have to put in extra work, because it feels like nobody else is putting in extra work, but we have to. And why should we if we're struggling? And so that's something that I always tell myself. But I mean, we're here. Sam, the fact that, like, and we said this before the show.
Can I?
Yeah, what's up?
I was just going to say, Fernando, you brought up something, and I want to bring Sam into this too. You alluded to this, so I don't know if this is exactly what you're saying, but sometimes the source of depression can be comparing yourself. In other words, you said everyone else doesn't seem to need to work this hard. Or you didn't say that, but something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And we are under this is, I think, one of the dangers of social media, and this has been proven through science, scientific studies, that we look at everyone else and we think, wow, everyone else is fine. I'm the one that's fucked up. If I'm the problem, I can't get it together. Everyone else is moving on with their life, achieving their dreams, doing all these wonderful. I'm the one that's the problem. And I think that's actually a lie. I think it's a lie. I think we all have these secret parts of ourselves. I was just thinking about this today in my therapy session. Tell me if you guys, if it resonates with you. But the whole Robin Williams journey. Here was a guy in public who was beloved. He seemed full of life and zest and funny, and then silently and secretly, he was uh, completely crumbling to the point where he killed himself. So I think it's better to find ways to get it out and be vulnerable in front of someone. Certainly, Fernando, you've got a loved one to be vulnerable with. I have a wife who I can be vulnerable with, and you just feel like, what is their reaction going to be? They're going to laugh, or they're going to say, "Oh, I'm out of here," or what? But you can also, and you can look at it a different way, which is if I'm vulnerable and open, uh, maybe I'm also giving them the freedom to be vulnerable and open with me. And I think that's something that we're just desperate to find in life. But I'm going to say that's what I think for myself. So Sam, what do you think about it?
Maybe Fernando can go first. I think he was gonna say something, and then I'll respond after.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, just real quick. I was just gonna say, in terms of, like, coping and having to learn things, and trying to figure things out, and you know, um, yeah, I just feel like the people that don't know you don't realize, I think, how important and how great it is that you're doing this episode today. All right, and I think the people that do know you, if they obviously, if they knew like what you've been just dealing with and struggling with, would be so happy and proud of you, right? Because, like, it isn't easy. The fact that you're here, I canceled
Thank
the show.
you.
I wasn't feeling good, and the fact that you're here, like, you've learned how to do.
Here, here.
You're learning, yeah. Like, you're on the way. That's what it is. You're on the way, and I just wanted to say that. I think that's a really good, like, it's just a prime example of somebody who's always learning, and having to adapt because these things sort of change, and that's what you're doing. And so I hope that's something that people can take out of this episode too. It's just having this conversation, I think.
Thank you. I really think that what you said there, honestly, accepting change is also a way of coping. Like for me, like learning that change is imminent all the time. Life is goes in cycles, and sometimes you repeat experiences just to learn from them again and to see if you actually get it this time. You know, I believe that. I believe that our lessons come in cycles, and accepting that some things need to change for you to move on with your life. And and for me, like, I'm just going to be open, like I struggle with addiction, and it's just and this goes for everybody, anybody that is addicted to anything. Like, it could be food, it could be drugs, it could be alcohol, it could be weed, it could be whatever. If you struggle with addiction, it's something to take a second look at, to just see where it comes from and why you're addicted to it, and to see, does it really fit your life anymore. And also that, to know that it is a tough process to go through, but that is part of the imminent change and the evolution of all of us, I feel, to become the best versions of ourselves. Because addictions are crutches when we don't want to face what's really in our minds or outside of us. And I just feel like being able to come to terms with change in all ways is something that can really help you keep your, like, bad feelings at bay. I keep referring to them as bad feelings because that's what all of this really is. Like, a lot of the things like that have to do with mental health that kind of claw at us is these bad feelings, and we don't want to feel these bad feelings. So, just know that you can do it. Like, you can do anything. Like, you can do anything that you want in order to, you can better yourself, you can better your life. And you can also, nobody can tell you, how to live it either. So do what's best for you.
Yeah, absolutely. That was beautifully
Be
said.
will yeah be being absolutely being willing to. One of the things when I was in that outpatient program was there was a lot of addiction represented there, and it was an epiphany for me to recognize that even depression can be an addiction. It's a way of just saying, well, I can't cope and I'm depressed, and rather than move forward and heal. And but I love everything you said, and it is a choice that we can make. So Fernando, I wanted to spin this now back to you and ask, how do you think that these kind of explorations can be found in performance ensemble?
Yeah, yeah, thank you
Wow.
for bringing us back to performance. I think, um so I think that a lot of it is okay. So this is like a sort of a tie into what Sam had said a couple of minutes ago when you were talking about crying as being a good thing, right? Because it's a release, like you're releasing bad things. Um, I look at words the same, right? And I mean, if
Hmm.
you just want to be super meta, or you just want to be super like just weird performance art, like a lot of it is just an extension, right? It's a thought, and that thought
Wow.
envelops you, and that sort of envelopment of your body goes through your arm and into your pen, into your pencil, into your thumbs, onto your phone, onto your sheet of paper, and it
Yes.
becomes that performance. You are literally shedding a lot of those things that you've been harboring. And I think, unfortunately, I feel like a lot of artists are just always, struggling with something. It may not be addiction, it may not be mental health issues, it may be other things, but there's
Hmm.
always a struggle, right? Like we are very curious and weird souls, and like you don't even have to be a performer or an artist, but I think with performance specifically, it gives you this really weird meta but also just physical way of releasing a lot of these things. I think that when I first started becoming really open about the things that I was struggling with happened in performance. I was taking, what was it? I think the first time I ever joined performance ensemble, I like I told you this funny story too, JD, of like I wrote this whole piece and I forgot the whole thing and I just sort of made it up on the spot. Um, but what I made up on the spot was something that I was struggling with so bad that semester, and a lot of it was just like my own mental health. I was drowning. So whatever came out just came out, and I realized like, oh, it was I was on stage. We had actually filled out the whole theater, and I think that theater holds 250 people, so there was at least like 100 something people there, right? I
Wow.
was in front of 100 people, and I just told them I'm depressed. You know, lights were all shining on me, everybody's staring at me, and they can like see me, and
Wow.
yeah, and with every semester, I realized that I still want to perform things. I want to perform different things. It is always about our mental health, but there's a lot of things that we carry with us that affect the way that we feel about ourselves, right? Um, and it may not seem like it, but like thinking about things like how upset I get over gentrification, or when I think about, I mean, like what's happening right now in the Middle East, right? Like a lot of those things affect people. It may not be mental health related, but it can affect your mental health, right? And so I think that's the beauty about performance. This is where performance comes in. I think that you can do something about what you're feeling, right? It's no longer just a thought, it can be something that you're putting on stage. And once you finish performing, you get to leave the theater, and those feelings don't. They stay there, right? Like the things that you wrote stay there on stage and you're gone. And I think that's what it can do for people.
Wow. I truly believe that. And that's really beautiful. I feel like it's poetry when you speak about your feelings like that, even just now in a conversation, Fernando, seriously, because, that's really important, that point that those words stay there. Like you've transferred that energy to that space. And, and you get to witness it, people get to witness it, and you get to experience a release. Like I could say the same, like in my experience in performance, and even the community, that support system is just was so good for my mental health. When we were in that, like I always knew that there was someone who was going to accept my feelings and like literally let me cry on their shoulder if I needed it. And then we all come together and create art that means something to us, and all release. We're all so accepting of each other's release. It's just such a beautiful experience. And like a pen to paper, like Fernando said, in any type of way, if it's doodling, if it's poetry, if it's just stream of consciousness, that is a physical release of, whatever happens. Like when I get my bouts of anxiety, like sometimes I will choose to just write. And I feel a little bit lighter. I feel less dense because I, I released some of it. And so courageous to, put those feelings, in front of an audience as well. And that could help people too. I feel like that's so cathartic to know that maybe you were able to help someone as well.
And I love what you just said, both of you. And it seems to me that performance ensemble and the arts in general happening around us, to us all the time. Fernando, you mentioned the Middle East, or even more closer to home, anything. And so to take this soup of chaos, or Sam, your word of density, and then find a way articulate, putting words to it. That's part of the wonderful process of art and performance ensemble. I know that's worked for us. Now, also, I think harkening back to something that Fernando said, when you say what you have to say, and there's an audience there, I think a big part, what I've learned in talking to people who suffer from depression like myself, a huge thing is just to feel heard. Did you hear
Yep.
me? Can you just hear me out? You don't even have to try to fix it.
Hmm.
Just hear me. And what I found about performance ensemble is it's a way for the artist to feel heard, certainly. And funnily enough, by articulating from a well of authenticity, the audience feels heard in a strange way. It's like you're
Hmm.
articulating something I feel deep inside. So now I feel heard too.
Wow. Ooh, I got chills hearing that.
Yeah, I feel
That's what I love about performance.
yeah, it's funny too how we like didn't bring it up earlier, but it's such a good point that Sam brought up too. That was like community, right? Like you don't realize how important it is to have. I mean, let's look at PE for example, right? Like if we start at the top, like you have a director that actually like Jade just like she cares about you as a person.
Mhm.
Like you're not just a student, you're not just a you're a person. And I think that the community that we build inside that black box is indescribable. Like you just, how
Mhm.
can I sell something like that to somebody? You just have to experience it yourself. And
Yeah.
sometimes I do think back to when we were there, and I mean, we were just so happy,
So
and
happy.
and though we were still probably struggling with our own things, and I'm sure we all were. Um, the sense of community, I think, brought a lot of safety. It
Mhm.
brought a lot of possibility, right? So it's possible to be
Mhm.
able to speak out about something. It's possible to confide in someone. It is possible to not be okay, and that is okay, right? And so, so I just wanted to wrap up real quick, and either of you can answer this, but I guess just what sort of advice do you have for people that are experiencing issues with like mental health or mental illness? But also, what would you like to say for anybody that is experiencing those things and they're interested in joining PE?
So I would say that, if you're going through something, if you're having bad feelings, if you're feeling depressed, if you are anxious every single day of your life, and I know that there's people that are, you know, like people feel like there's no hope or like you can't even make it another day. I just really, really encourage you to find what makes you happy. As hard it's really a lot easier to feel bad than as hard, I'll explain myself a little, but it's a lot easier to stay down than to pick yourself up, like to drag yourself and make sure. Like this morning, I thought I couldn't move all day, but I knew that talking to Jeff and Fernando would make me feel better and would make me feel good, and that a good exercise and watching a funny video would make me feel good. Like if all you can do in the moment is watch a video of funny cats, like just like remember that life is good. Life is good, and even though it may seem dark in here, um it's still really good out here, and it just takes a little bit of perspective. And if you are interested in joining Performance Ensemble, I promise you will have a huge change of perspective and sense of community and people who will be there for you. Not like, and I know that I don't know these people that are going to be joining, but I know what Performance Ensemble, what the atmosphere that creates and what the professor creates, and there's no way out of that family once you're in it. So
Yeah.
just find what makes you feel good, like inside, not what you think anybody else will think is acceptable. Just really, really go deep inside and be there for yourself, because you're not alone either.
Mm, wow. Um, that's wonderful. I just hopefully audience you love hearing these two as much as I do, because I just feel so much better just hanging out. But a couple of
Same.
things from Depression Warrior I'm going to share with you. First of all, I would like Fernando, if it's okay, if we could put the suicide hotline in the comments below, because sometimes when you talk about certain
Mhm.
things like this, it may trigger somebody. And so that is worth reaching out. I think that that's a message I think we want to make sure we get
Yeah.
out there. When I have sunk to the lowest of the low, like laying on a railroad track kind of low,
Mhm.
you have to, I'm not, when I say you, I mean me. So if this resonates with you, great. You have to imagine something you've never seen before. Because all I knew had led me to this moment, and it was all depression and it was all the junk that you're kind of carrying along with you. You have to imagine, and Sam, I think this is kind of alluding to what you said too, that there joy possible. You may not think so, but there is something out there that you've just never seen. You have to imagine it and then live into that imagined possibility. And that's what I do as someone who struggles with depression and suicidal ideation often. That's one of the things my go-tos is I have to imagine I'm going to create something that doesn't exist, but I can make it so. And then in performance ensemble itself, it's challenging because you may not have accessed some of these deep recesses of emotion that you know that have been there all along, but maybe you didn't know how to get to them. But it is, like Sam was saying, it's a place where it's an oasis. I would look forward to that time when I could just go and be challenged, but also feel comforted too. And I just feel like it's something that if you are a junior or senior, freshman, sophomore, uh, and we've said this before too, it's something that would be so beneficial to your not only college education, but your self actualization
Mhm.
to know how to access those things and deal with them moving forward into your adult life, into your career for the rest of your life. So it is something like here, Sam and Fernando and I mean, we met years ago and we're still connected in a deep way because of that experience. And so thank you, Jade. I think it does come from the top down, as Sam was saying. We don't know who the classmates will be, but Jade will make it something because she
Yeah.
leads that way. And so definitely give it a shot, says
Yeah, thank you. I think I want to leave it there. I think we have discussed a lot of difficult things, but I think we ended it with something beautiful, right? And I think at the end of the day, whether it's our own little circle, whether it's PE or just life in the grand scheme of things, right? It can be beautiful, and I think that a lot of it does take work, which can seem daunting, but I think the reward is worth every single bit of you having to learn something different, learning how to cope differently, learning how to communicate, learning how to just understand and love yourself. And
Mhm.
um, again, thank you both for having this very personal and very difficult conversation. It's never difficult when it's with you guys, you know? And so I appreciate that. And for anybody watching, thank you for watching. This has been CSUN Performance Ensemble Presents In Conversation with. My name is Fernando Martinez.
my name is Jefferson
My
Denham.
name is Samantha Garcia.
Awesome.